Good morning. It's June 10th, 2013, and this is a short video that I'm making about real education as opposed to indoctrination. And every now and then I get an email or I get a Facebook question, how do I talk to my parents about this? How do I talk to family about this issue? How do I wake people up? Well, there's a lot of talk about education and how all these taxes need to be collected so children have education. But we need to ask, what is education as opposed to indoctrination? I remember in the 8th grade being in a mandatory sex education, so-called education classroom, and the topic of masturbation came up. Now, I'm only 15 years old. I don't know what jacking off is. Well, by the time I got into high school and saw the pretty girls, later on I knew what masturbation was. But at the time, in the 8th grade, I did not know what masturbation was. And yet it's being talked about to these really young children. And I remember asking the nerdy kid in front of me, what is masturbation? And he turned around and kind of laughed at me and simulated the act of phone sex, and with his other hand, gesturing in a masturbation type of manner. And I was just kind of like, remember everybody was laughing at me because I didn't know what masturbation was. I think I was 14 at that particular point in time. But if that's going to be mandatory, why isn't it mandatory for high schools and middle schools? I don't think the 8th grade is too young. In fact, I don't think the 5th grade is too young to learn about money. If we're in a world where our mother tells us, or our father, don't get in the car with a stranger, don't take candy with a stranger, don't go on dates until I say you can, don't have sex until you're at a certain age, right? Our parents tell us these things because they want to protect us. How many of your parents at a very young age explained to you how the Federal Reserve operates and other central banks? How many of you were sat down by your mother or were sat down by your father, either parent, or your grandparents, and explained the very basics of how whole countries can be enslaved to just a few banks when they borrow beyond their means to pay back what they're borrowing? And how does that apply when we look at the model of Africa to what's going on today in the United States? How does that apply to the individual? The individual that borrows money at 40% interest and ends up losing everything? We have a situation here where so many women are going to school to become independent from the need to have a family, independent from this, and they end up coming out, a lot of them, in great debt. Not to knock those that have gone to school and have been successful, but when men and women borrow money from strangers, bad things can happen. So how many of you can remember your mother or your father saying, don't take money from strangers when you're an adult, even if they say it'll make your life easier, even if they say you'll have a good home, even if they say with the amount of money that they're giving you that people will like you and want to be with you, that you will find happiness, right? Happiness through material things. Yes, the new religion. How many of your parents warned you not to take money from strangers? And I'm willing to bet less than half of you. I'm willing to bet less than a quarter of you got a real education as to what the real world is like. And does that mean that your parents are to blame? Your parents are responsible for giving you basic pieces of information as you come into this world. However, a lot of parents in this world aren't really, fit to be parents, just because they have procreative abilities to, have a baby, stick a penis in a vagina and ejaculate. That doesn't really equate to having real parenting skills. Most of you know this. The reason why so many of us have ended up in bad situations economically is because our parents also were uneducated. They had no knowledge really at the time that we were coming up about interest rates, about the immorality of the banks. How many of your parents know about the links between Wall Street and drug running and the CIA? So if we don't have an education as to how we need to truly become economically free, how we need to teach our children how to maintain their own freedom from economic slavery. Unless we're aware of those things, we're just going to end up in a situation where we could become victims of those strangers driving down the street, waving money at us that's printed out of thin air with a contract that's a mile long saying we got to pay 40% interest or they'll come after the physical things, the material things that we may end up acquiring later on in life. So you hear a lot of people talking about how the people need to be taxed even more for education. And I would ask that, you share this concept, this principle, this idea with them. Is it education or is it indoctrination? If we're going to be warned about not getting in the car with strangers, why do we take money from strangers? Why is that okay? Because the money seems to have value, because it's green and because the baubles are shiny, you can have a car, but it's not really your car. Oh, you can have a home, but it's not really your home. You can have this, you can have that, you can have this, you can have that. Here's some credit. Here's a credit card. It's not credit. It's debt. Money is debt. I mean, the very fact they call a credit card credit is just the biggest joke in the world. So set yourself free. Set yourself free from the indoctrination that may have been programmed into your cerebral cortex, and work to help others. Work to educate your children. They are not too young. If your children is being exposed to pornographic images through mainstream TV, if your child is being taught how to masturbate at the age of 10, I mean, I'm hearing now, and in our day and age, kids are being taught these things at younger and younger and younger age. I mean, before they're hitting puberty. Why aren't there classes and presentations in middle schools and things like that, about economic slavery and the history of the world and all these things that have happened in the past? And I don't think it's deliberately a conspiracy on the part of teachers to not educate the children. They themselves are indoctrinated as well. But teachers also know that if they cross a certain line and start creating their own curriculums, they can also threaten their own economic stability if they fucking lose their job. So a lot of it is subtle. If you want to have a real education, you got to learn, I don't want to say from the streets, but you got to learn from the real lessons that come in life. And the elders amongst us, those that have real world experience on this planet, they are the ones that I think people should be listening to. There's a lot of excellent information out there that has come about in the last 5 years, since 2008, since people started to think about this economy and how we can get out of this recession/depression. And that education, real information, real-time data ought to be shared with really young people. If they're being exposed to pornography, if they're being exposed to sex education, they need to be exposed to a real education about the nature of money. They need to learn about creating wealth. They need to learn about, how to create their own local business. They need to learn about, the art of local currency, of bartering. I was talking with Christy from Soul Journeys Radio. She has a show on American Freedom Radio. And she has a video called Project Love Your Neighbor. And this whole concept is centered around a website where people go and they find the city that they're in and they click on whatever skill they have or that they're looking for. Maybe they're looking for a carpenter. Maybe they're looking for a gardener. Maybe they're looking for a builder. Maybe they're looking for a babysitter, right? And it's a skill share. It's not based on money, but it's based on trading skill for skill. And all of us have some form of talent or skill. You may not learn how to exercise that talent or skill or ability in the public governmental indoctrination educational school system, but those skills, those talents are going to come about. We're going to discover them. We do discover them completely independently from that type of a system, which is why it's really important for parents to encourage their children to exercise their talents, whether it be music, whether it be some form of sport or exercise, whether it be literature. Maybe someone's child is interested in a certain piece of history. They want to understand why things are the way that they are. I believe it's the responsibility of the parent to encourage their child to excel at their talents. And if possible, if they're going to live in a world where, we're earning Federal Reserve notes to pay rent and whatnot for those that still live in the grid, the best way to go about helping their child, is to help them make a living doing what it is that they're good at. Not making a living taking money from others. I mean, look at all the people that are working for corporations that are taking money from others, and their money comes from the corporation that's basically giving them the payoff money. You look at all the police officers out there, the ones that are immoral. Not the moral peace officers, but the immoral ones that make a living giving people tickets and citations. Look at all the people that work for counties across the nation that make their wages by running around giving people citations for not having their building permits up to date, or other things up to code. Basically giving people citations and then getting a kickback from the big daddy master that they serve. This is not mindful, and ultimately, as we wrap this up here, only got a few minutes left, and I'm going to be going back to the San Juan Mountains, going camping tonight and backpacking, doing some real living, not sitting in front of a desk, chasing Federal Reserve notes and things of that nature. If I'm going to be poor, I'm going to be free. And that's what my last point is, that this is about being spiritually fit. Okay, if you want to be balanced, body, mind, and spirit, taking money from others so you can survive isn't a mindful way to live. And being ignorant of how you are in bondage economically, as well as the plans for your children to be in bondage economically, that does not equate to being spiritually fit as well. Part of being spiritual, and you can, there's a light and a dark aspect of spirituality, but in terms of the light side, intuition at some point, third eye, does play a part. And at some point, intuition, third eye, has got to see the economic slavery that a lot of people are going through right now at this particular point in time. And so the intuition in a spiritually fit human being has got to kick in and go, wait a minute, I've got to explain to my child that you don't take candy from strangers and you don't take money from strangers. You read the contract. You read how much you're going to borrow. You got to pay back 30%, 40%, 50%. We need to help our children live a life where they're not going to end up as total debt slaves. Because I'll tell you what, long term, granted, we don't have this revolution and, we don't turn things around, which I think we're we're a long ways off from being able to collectively shift and turn things around, because there's still a lot of people still working very hard to serve this system. If we don't have that turnaround, we're going to see situations like debt prisons. We're going to see situations where foreign governments are going to have particular interests in how much money certain Americans own. And that will prove to be a huge public safety issue in the years ahead if this country is conquered. So think about that. It's all food for thought. Please help educate people about the importance of having a real education and the need for us to be debt-free, to be economically free.